Hello everybody, my name is Jeffrey Way and this is a new episode in the long-running JavaScript from Null series. We've already covered 6 different episodes. We've covered events, we've covered cross-browser events, we've covered everything from the basic language, for statements, while statements, creating variables. We're going to do 2 things today. We're going to work with building a helper function that everybody can use, and then I'm going to teach you about debugging JavaScript, which is extremely important. And believe it or not, years ago, debugging JavaScript was insanely difficult, but thanks to some new tools like developer tools or Firebug, it's much easier, and I'm going to show you how to work with those today. Alright, so let's first start by building our function. So I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to be working in an editor. It's Vim, if you're familiar with the editor Vim, or MacVim for the Mac. It's a different way to code. It's a way to code more in a language base. So traversing a document, you kind of use a language. So I'm not going to teach you it here, but if you are interested in Vim and why many people swear by it, search for a series on NetTuts called Venturing into Vim. Venturing into Vim. And it's a 4-part series. It's not free, unfortunately. It is under our premium umbrella, but it'll show you how amazing it is and how useful it can be. Anyhow, for now, feel free to use any editor that you wish. It doesn't matter. All right, so we're going to begin, and we're going to place this all in the main page for now to make things easier. What I want to build is a function that'll accept an array, and it'll filter through that array and only return the ones that are unique. So for example, let's say we have a variable called myArray, and if you remember, we can either do new array or we can do the literal form, which is recommended like this. Now we can add values, so I can say Jeffrey, and we can do the CEO, Collis of Envato, the Tuts Manager, Skelly, or you might know her as Tash. Now, what if I repeat this and I do Jeff again, Collis again, and Skelly again? What's going to happen here is we have multiples. So what if I need a way to go through this array and say only return the ones that are unique? So all I want is Jeff, Collis, and Skelly. I don't need these additional items here. So why would you ever use this? You'll use it a lot. To give you an example, I had to use it recently where I had a little filtering tool where it would go through a list of items. It would find the data attribute, and what it would do is it would get that value and it would compile all those values and generate a list of links. So then when you would click on that respective link, it would filter the entire list down to only show items that contain that link. So it sounds more confusing than it is, but the basic idea of how it would work is I use JavaScript to grab all of the attributes and turn them into an array. But some repeat, of course, so you would have multiple items in the array. So what I then needed to do is create a function that would only return the unique items, and you'll have tons of different uses for this. So I'm going to show you one way to build it with just vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so let's begin. The first thing is we need to abstract this away to its own function since it's going to be used multiple times. You can save it to a text expander program or something like that. So we're going to say var unique equals function. So you can either do it this way or you can do it the traditional way, function unique. Mostly they're identical. There are some differences why some people prefer to use this method over the other one. However, that far exceeds the scope of this tutorial. It's more for advanced usage. So for now, accept that you can use either of these. Alright, so we're going to do this one. First thing that we need to do is this function needs to accept an array, of course, right? So we'll go right in here and we'll give it a param name of, or an argument name of original array. That way when we pass in that array that we created earlier, it'll be represented by orig array. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create our variables. As we've learned in previous lessons, it's a best practice to always declare your variables at the top of a function. There are a handful of reasons. One is for organizational purposes, so you don't have variables scattered throughout your functions. And 2, and this term is a bit beyond the scope of where you're at right now. It's called variable hoisting, and it's the way JavaScript works, where it'll take all variable names and it'll hoist or push them all the way to the top of the function. We'll go over that maybe in another lesson. However, if you'd like to learn more, again on NetTuts, we have a tutorial on JavaScript hoisting. So just come to the search box and search for JavaScript hoisting. and I believe it's a video. Yeah, there you go. So if you'd like to learn more about that, refer there. Okay, so let's begin by declaring our variables. The first one will be new array. So the way this works is we have to compare every value in the array that we pass it. But the only way to compare it is to have two arrays. So hopefully this will make more sense. I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable, and it'll be called new array. And for now, it's going to be equal to an empty array. Next, we need, in order to filter through this array, we can use a for statement. So we could do something like for var I equals 0, and I is less than, and we'll get the length value, and then we'll increase I by 1. So we've gone over this before. We simply create a variable, and then we make it filter through. So this variable is going to run for as many items in our array. So if it helps you, let's go ahead and create that again. Var myArray equals Jeff Skelly Collis. And then I'm going to repeat some again. So when we call this function, original array will be equal to this. And then we get the length. In this case, the length will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to run this for statement 6 times. Now, what do we need to do within this for statement? We need to compare this value and make sure it's not repeated. However, there's a couple things I want to go over with you here. A couple bad practices. First, we learned that we want to declare all variables at the top, yet we could declare one here. Now, truthfully, you can get away with this and you'll see it everywhere. However, that being said, if you can, try to remember, declare it at the top. It makes things a little bit cleaner. So there you would declare it I, or you could also do I equals 0. It just depends on the case. And then at this case, you can simply say I. Or in this case, we will go ahead and initialize it because it could be initialized to something else. So here, we declare I, and then here, we set it to 0. Next, orig length. When we run this for statement, every time through the loop, we have to go and find the length value again. It's like doing the same task over and over. Wouldn't it be better if we could, quote unquote, cache that value? And we can. So we'll do it up here. And we'll say orig length is going to be equal to origarray.length. That way we don't have to do it over and over. And now we can say, and as long as I is less than orig length. There we go, and that's a much cleaner method to do this. All right, so we have our variables, new array, orig length, and I. Now we're going to run through our for statement, and we're going to filter through this array right here. Now try to think to yourself, if you want, pause it and see how would you figure out if there are duplicate values here. I wish there was a native way to do it, but nah, there's not. So we need to create this new array. And the first thing we need to do is create another for statement within it. And now I could do for var y. However, I'm going to declare it at the top. So I'm going to say I and j. And we'll say for j equals 0 again, and j is less than new array.length j++. All right, so a couple of things you might be concerned about here. First, how come we're not following the same practice that we did above here where we cached the length value? And the reason is because the length of this new array is going to be changing often, so we cannot cache that value the way we could with a static array that we have here. So we're going to have to go ahead and recheck that value every time because it will change. So within this for statement, we'll say if the original array I is equal to the new array item, then we need to create some kind of variable to let us know that something was found. So I'm going to add that up here as well. There we go, and I will go ahead and auto format this as well. And now we'll say found equals true. If you're getting confused, don't worry. It's not too complicated here. We begin by filtering through this array. So this is going to run 7 times. But then we need to check to see if any of these values are duplicates. And the only way to do it is to slowly add each item to the new array. So we first start by going if the orig array I. So don't let that confuse you. Just go to the first one, orig 0. So go to my array and get the first one is Jeff. And we're saying is Jeff equal to the first item in this new array? Well, we know that this is empty right now, so this will never even run. So it's going to skip it. So let's add a new line below here, and we'll say if not found new array dot push orig array x. Okay, so a few new concepts to learn. First, push. What is push? Push is a way to append a new item to an array. So when I say new array.push, we're pretty much saying add a very new item to the array. And what is that value going to be? It's going to be equal to the original array, and I'm sorry, that should be I. In this case, it would be Jeff. So let's go through it again. Always when you get confused, just go back and start over. Go through the original array, and then for j equals 0 and j is less than the new array.length, well, there is no length, so this will never run. Then we skip to this line, and we're saying if not found. Well, we don't have found isn't set to a value, like we could do false, but that's really not needed because by default, found has a value of undefined. And undefined, if you were to convert that to a Boolean, true or false, would be false. But then we negate it. We'd be saying if this value is true, only in that condition do you run this. So if true, run this. However, in this case, we see found equals false because remember, this never ran. So found is undefined or false. So this will never run. But I do want this to run, so I'm going to say negate it. So now we're saying if true, essentially, add this new item. And what are we adding to the original array or the new array? We're adding Jeffrey. So now this is equal to Jeffrey. All right, so let's run through it again. Now we do it again. And this time there is a length value of 1 as long as j equals 1. So this will run 1 time. And now we're going to do it again. For ridge array I, so now it's going to be Skelly. And we're going to say, is that equal to new array y? Well, we know that's Jeffrey now. That contains that one value, Jeffrey, or Jeff. Does Skelly equal Jeff? No, it does not, so this doesn't run. And we leave our loop. Again, this value is false, so we push the new item into the array. So now that we have Jeff Skelly, and this is going to happen again for callus. But now let's do the repeat. So we go here. At this point, the new array.length is 3, so it's going to run a handful of times. And each time, we're going to say, does Jeff, at this point, a ridge I would be a ridge 4. Does Jeff equal Jeff? Yes, it does equal it, so we set found to true. And what found equals true means is we've found a duplicate, don't do anything. So here, this would then be equal to false. Found is true, and the exclamation point negates it, which kind of reverses the value. So we're saying if false, then nothing happens here. So now Jeffrey never gets added, and the same thing will happen here. So the reason why we need 2 for statements here is you need one to go over my array, and then you need another for statement to filter through the new array that we're creating. However, we have this function, but nothing is being returned. So always make sure if you have a function like this, it needs to return the value, right? And we're going to return not the original array, we're going to return the new modified array. Now I've intentionally made a mistake here, and it's so we can go into debugging together. So let's go ahead and test this out. So we created a new array, and I'm going to call unique. We're going to pass in my array. However, remember, our function returns a value, so we have to be sure to assign that returned value to something. And we'll call it my array. Again, we're going to overwrite the value of this existing array. It's going to be equal to whatever is returned from this function right here. Finally, how can we see the results? Well, the old way, and you can still use it every once in a while, is alert, and that'll just show an alert box. However, much more practical and less intrusive is to use the console. This is available to you in most modern browsers. So in Chrome, Safari, you have the developer tools. In Firefox, you have Firebug. So for now, we're going to log my array. So before you can work with Firebug, you have to download it. It's an extension. So all you need to do is go to getfirebug.com, and I believe I've mentioned this in one of the earlier episodes. So simply click on Install Firebug for Firefox, and then when the page reloads, or when the browser refreshes, you'll have access to it. And it's going to look like this right here. So you're not going to see anything, and that's okay because we don't have anything on our page. But what we want is what we logged to the console. And what's excellent about Firebug is that it'll tell you what mistakes you've made. And this is very helpful. As you can see here, when I noted I intentionally made some mistakes, missing semicolon after for loop condition, and it'll say line 16. So if we go to line 16, it's saying there's some kind of issue right here. And now if we look, can you see where the mistake was made? Right here. We're missing a semicolon. So I'm going to save that, refresh the page, and now it'll tell us where the other mistakes were made. Y is not defined. And of course, it's because we called this Y instead of calling it J. So hopefully you caught these mistakes when we were going through it the first time. Let's try another one. And now, check it out. We get Jeff Skelly Collis, even though this value is much higher. So far, everything seems okay. However, let's test this out. You always need a test. And in later lessons, we'll learn about actual test suites. After Collis, let's repeat some. So we'll do Frank and Frank. So if we save that and we come back and we refresh the page, you're not going to see anything. And how come? And this is where we have to debug, and we need to figure out, okay, how come Frank is being ignored here? How can you do this? Well, one, you can do it manually and just go over this code yourself, or you can use Firebug. So how can you set breakpoints? You can go to your HTML or your script area, and you see here we can say, right here, if I click off to the left, I can set breakpoints, and this means when the JavaScript gets to this point, it's going to stop and wait for us to filter through it. So now if I click refresh, you see that it's stopped, and now I can click here to go through each step. So there are three options that you'll see right here. The first one, if I hover over it, is step into. So if there's a function and you click that, it'll step into the function. Now if you want to skip that function code and skip to the next line, you would do step over. And if you're within a function and you want to come out of it, you would click step out. Most of the time when you're first getting started, you can click this first one. So I'm going to refresh the page and start over. And let's test out what's going on here and figure out why Frank is being ignored. So I'm going to click next. And as you can see, when I hover over these, the values are set to the right. And then I can hover over the variable names to see their values as well. Here, because new array has been initialized to an empty array, that's what the value is when I hover over it. If I click again, now you can see the original array's length is 8, and so orig length is equal to 8 as well. Now these values, we've declared them, but we haven't initialized them. So when a value is declared and not initialized, remember initialized is just a fancy term for saying variable equals blah. It'll be set to undefined by default, as you can see right there. So immediately, Firebug's a big help. All right, so now we have our for statement right here, and we're going to filter through the length. So as I equals 0, and as long as I is less than 8, add 1 to I. All right, let's go into it. And then we do another one. So let's go in here, and notice how it skipped over this entire line. And why did it do that? And it's because we set as long as 0 is less than 0. Remember, the new array, its length is 0. So as long as 0 is less than 0, run this code, but 0 is not less than 0, so nothing runs, and it skips over it. Okay. And now it says, if not found. Well, remember I told you by default, found would be equal to undefined, and as a Boolean, undefined, or an empty string, or false, or null, those are all false. They're falsy values. But I negated that, so I want this code to run if it's false. And that's why we negate it by making it true. If it's true that this is equal to false, then run this. And it is true. So we go to new array, and we add a new item using the push method, and we add the value, and we go to original array 0 is Jeff. So now I click it, and that's done. And if you go to new array right here, you can see a new item, Jeffrey, has been added. So you can use Firebug to learn how to work with JavaScript. So now we do it again. And this time we can see that new array.length is 1. Is j equals 0 less than 1? Yes. Now this is the first time that we've run the code within this for statement. So here we say if origin array 1, so that's Skelly, does Skelly equal new array 0? Jeff, no, it does not equal that. So we skip. And now if we come down again, found is equal to false because this never ran. So we add Skelly to the new array. If we skip here, now you can see 2 items have been added to this new array. So we're not going to do this too much longer. I want to skip over, and I'm going to do Collis. But as you can see here, the for statement runs an additional time for every loop because we have to check every value in the new array. So let's do it this time. So now we have j equals 2, and as long as j is less than 3, j++. So we go in here and we say if orig array 3. So that's the next item. If we go through here, 0, 1, 2, 3, Jeff. So we'll say if Jeff equals new array 0, does Jeff equal Jeff? Yes, it does. So we do found true. So at this point we know that we have a duplicate, right? And we've set found to true. But watch. See, that runs again. Why does it keep running? And it's because we have to filter through all the items in that array. But doesn't that seem unwise? Because we've already found a duplicate. We know we don't need to check any further because we already found one. So is there a way that we can say, yes, we found one, just break out of this loop because we don't need to keep doing this over and over? Yes, there is a way, and it's called break. So you see here how we have the single line form of if statements. This is generally considered a bad practice. And the reason is it works fine for these one-liners and saves space. However, invariably when you come back to these statements and you decide, oh, I want to add one more thing, at that point you have to do extra work. So when possible, go ahead and wrap everything within curly braces. And now we're going to paste that in. So now we need to break out of the for statement, and we call it break. Break is a sibling to another one called continue. So if you're ever in a for statement and you see break, that means break out entirely of this for statement, no matter where you are in the loop, and go on to what comes next. Continue, on the other hand, is a little bit different. It means break out of the current loop. So if we, at the very top, we wrote continue. This would mean forget everything that comes in this for loop. I want to skip over and go to the very next item in the loop. So j equals 0, we get continue, and then if we did that, it would immediately skip and go to j equals 1 and run something. But now we're already improving our application because of Firebug, and we pointed out that we were running too many for loops even though we'd already found something. So once you find it, you can set found equals true, and then you can break out of the for loop because you're done there. Okay, so let's continue on with what we had before. So in this case, we did find Jeff equals Jeff, so now found was true. And here we have found is true, but we negate it. So we're saying if false, well, that's not going to run because this will only run if this is true. So in that case, nothing will be added. And as you can see here, if I refresh, nothing gets added to that array. But now we have one problem, and thanks to Firebug, we can see it. Remember how found is always undefined, and we use that to determine whether or not this gets added? Well, now that we've overwritten the value of found, it's always going to be true. And if I hover over it up here, now it's true. It's not undefined. So this is going to screw up everything that we have here. So we need to remember within our for statements to reset found to undefined. And we can do that up here if we wish. And we'll say found equals undefined. Or you could say false, or you could say something like that. Okay? You can do either one. There we go. So now let's try it out and see if it's better. Remember, when you refresh the page, it's still going to stop at that breakpoint. So if you want to stop that, make sure you click it again. So I'm going to refresh again, and I'm going to come to the console, and I'll refresh that right here to clear everything that's in the console, and I'll refresh again, and now we get only the unique ones. So thanks to Firebug, we were able to filter through our function and make it better. Now I want to show you something. Remember how when we wanted to debug, we added this little debug button right here. You can do that directly from within your JavaScript, and a lot of people don't know this. So let's say I am working right here, and I want to say, you know what, I just want to figure out what's happening in here. Well, I could go in again and set a breakpoint right here. However, an easier way is to simply add a keyword called debugger. If I save that again, this will automatically trigger it. It's the exact same thing as if I added a breakpoint. So now when I refresh the page, you'll see that that's been added right there. And now I can filter and begin from there. So it's a very helpful technique to have. A lot of people don't know about that one, so now you do. So I'm going to save that, but now we've written a very helpful function. It could be improved a little bit. There are a couple things we can do here to shorten this code by a few lines, but this is a very good start for your first, and this would be called a utility function. Alright, so that's going to do it for this episode of JavaScript from Null. If you enjoyed it, the best way to say thank you is to come to net.touchplus.com and become a new subscriber, and that allows us to spend more money and more time into making NetTuts the best ever. So I will see you guys in future tutorials on NetTuts. Bye.